Good morning, everyone. Man, I missed 1 week and it just feels like it's been forever since I've done this. How are you doing, Kabo?
I'm great. Welcome back. We
Yeah,
Katie Hayes and I held it down last week without you. I think
I
we
heard
didn't
I
even
heard the
realize you
chat.
weren't here. I think we're going to go rogue and
Exactly.
start our own thing. Yeah.
I think that's the way to do it. I heard she crushed it and everybody was in the chat making it happen.
Oh yeah, she was getting invited to Europe. People were things were
We got invites to Europe? I don't
No,
get any of
no, we
those.
didn't. Katie
She
and
did.
Denise did.
Oh, shocker. Shocker. Okay, that sounds about right. Um, Speaking of Europe, yeah, I don't know how to transition that Europe to this, but in Europe, there's some good coaches, and on this call, we want to discuss what it takes to take ownership of your coaching development. And I think this is a great question for you, one, because of how long you've been coaching and how far you've come, but then also with the workshops you're doing, what we do with the Knowledge Pro and in Coach Dev. Good morning, everyone. So, taking ownership of coach development, your own personal development. What's your thoughts on that, just first and foremost?
Well, I'd like to quote the man behind the scenes, Christian Jensen, who said, "Just be better. Just be better."
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's
just got to
all we
be
have to
better.
do.
So
Yeah.
that's it. All right,
Yeah.
guys, that was good.
No, it's a great question to dive into because I know a lot of the frustrations with some of the coaches are, our gym doesn't really do coaching development. I want to get better, but everybody's busy. We don't have a program at our gym. I'm not quite sure what to do. I can't afford to pay to take a level 2 once a month, and so there's always question about what people can do beyond paying for a weekend course, kind of what people can do on a daily basis just to take control of getting better themselves. And yeah, I think there's a ton of stuff from taking a weekend course, a weekend seminar, to becoming a part of the Knowledge Pro. Obviously, we're huge fans of that and all the things we do there. We can dive into that a little bit. But it can be as simple as just taking one class, writing out a lesson plan, and coming up with some sort of a goal for yourself and seeing how you execute that and giving yourself a little feedback on how it went down and changing it a little bit and observing how you do it the next time. So there's a lot of different branches and legs we can take with this. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into it and talk about some of the different ways.
I'd be curious to know back before there were, I mean, when we started coaching, there was the level one, there was the previous version of the level two, or potentially the coach development course. There were a bunch of SME courses. Um, but besides that, there was not a bunch of information out there. So I'd be curious to know kind of what you did to develop as a coach. Was it mentors? Was it specific things that you were working
Mhm.
on? What was it?
Yeah, and I know you and I have talked about this a little bit before. Both of us had the advantage of being around some pretty hard hitters, like some pretty OG trainers. So I was able to learn a lot. Just I started coaching at a gym that the owner had like just gotten her level 2, like the old school level 2. She was on seminar staff already. And then another one of my friends who moved in and joined the gym, also on seminar staff, started as one of the first females over in the Euro crew. And so my coaching journey started by learning the basics from people that learned from kind of like the original crews, right? And so I didn't really have a lot of bad habits to get rid of. It was more like just starting with progressions and knowing the points of performance and uh, teaching people in a circle during warm up and consciously trying to make changes to their movements. Like that's how I started things, and so it created a really great baseline for me to continue to build on, versus what we see a lot of times now is there's so much information out there. It's up to the trainers a lot of times to weed through all of the noise and get back to what the basics are. But for me, I started with the basics. And so I had that really strong foundation from the very beginning that I've just been able to build upon and build upon and build upon.
Yeah, I think I think I went a similar route where I was so impressed with what I witnessed and took part of in the level one that was something that I wanted to do as far as seminar staff went. And so I just tried to replicate and mimic what I saw them do. So it was, I
Yeah,
knew they use these teaching progressions. So I'm going to teach with those teaching progressions. I knew they knew the
there's
points of performance. So I'm going to memorize those points of performance. And I think even to this day, a lot of it, like a lot of people go to the level one and they're taught using these progressions, but a lot of times they've never experienced those before. And so they don't even really, it doesn't even register how the movements are being taught or some of the different seeing and correcting. So it was like I wanted to mimic what I saw there. And then I was chasing like hitting the points of performance and like coaching movement patterns probably to the detriment of my athletes sometime, or at least the fun of my
sure.
classes and athletes.
Which I think
Um,
I've said this a bunch. I think that's a totally normal progression into your coaching journey is just that balance between working on your hard skills and putting a little more emphasis on the technical side, and then either needing someone to be evaluating and watching and reminding you, or you reminding yourself like, "Oh, I also need to have a little fun. Like this can't be so serious that I'm impacting the experience of the athletes." But when we start to really focus on those things you were talking about, I think it's only natural that we get a little bit of tunnel vision for that and we forget about, relaxing, making the class a little bit fun.
yeah, and love seeing this from Allie. We love having you in the Knowledge Pro, obviously, and have seen the development and the growth that you've got there. I love what Jens is putting out though. Is just talking about finding a mentor, being a mentor, investing in coach development. I think that's huge. He makes mention of that there. It's like a lot of people say that they can't afford to invest in coach development. He makes the point that you can't afford not to. That
Not
is your
to.
product.
Mhm.
Um,
Lita puts up a fantastic point here. I'll pull it up here. Recording yourself coaching a class, and I will tell you from personal experience. Yes, I 100% agree. It's the worst to watch yourself on video, but the more you do it, I never thought I would get to this point to say this, but the more you do it, the less cringy it becomes, and the more you can just. The more that I've let go of like, oh, my voice sounds like that. Why am I standing like that? That's really what I look like, and now I'm so much more focused on what is actually happening with my class. And I've been coaching CrossFit classes now for 16 years and I still benefit from seeing myself on video and watching things go down. I think that is it's tough to do, to watch. It's a little uncomfortable, but no one's more uncomfortable watching it than you. And it's such a great strategy when you don't have other options, for sure.
and I think that brings up another point, probably the second one that I'd say if we're thinking about a list here is like you made mention of going back and starting with the basics.
Hmm.
And so that's where you started your journey. And I think that's something that we all as coaches need to revisit. It's like in Coach Dev and the Knowledge Pro, we continue to hound the 9 foundational movements and the points of performance and the teaching progressions there because it's like if you know that stuff like the back of your hand, it's going to be easier to apply that to all the other movements. So that's one part. But then what I hear you just describing, which is videotaping, watching, giving yourself feedback is making sure that you're doing deliberate practice. And what I mean by that is like coaches coach classes, right, on a daily basis for some of us. Sometimes we're more part-time, 1 or 2 a week, 4 a week. Some coaches coach more, 10, 12, 14. But if all you're doing is going through the motions and you're just checking the box of like, hey, did I write a lesson plan? Did I get through 60 minutes? Did people hit the stimulus? And that's it. And you don't ever like self-evaluate and consider what could have gone better, um, you're missing an opportunity. Like it should be deliberate practice in all aspects of our coaching. So the teaching, the seeing, the correcting, the group management, presence and attitude and demonstration, and really trying to evaluate, hey, how can I be better this next class? What did I do yesterday that I can improve upon and get better at today? And there's just so much to dive into there. Lesson planning, the timestamps. I think the scene, and I think we get to a point as coaches to where when we've got our lesson plans, our group management dialed in, We can hit that pretty consistently. A lot of people don't get asked to be a coach if they don't have the right presence and attitude, even though we can get better at that. It's not there, but it's the teaching scene and correcting. I'm sure you guys all have athletes like I do that they've got faults that it's really hard to fix. And you potentially go to your go-to cues and it doesn't really work. And it's like, well, they're not injuring themselves. It's not a dangerous movement pattern. So I can just move on. Well, if you never consider trying to go a different route to fix that thing, you're going to lose some valuable learning opportunities there. What do you think about deliberate practice and the way you approach your classes?
100%. I coached yesterday and I wasn't even consciously giving myself feedback. It wasn't like I went in and I had, this goal on paper and here's what I'm going to do, but I had a plan. I executed the class and then I can give you about 5 things off the top of my head that I would do differently, that I didn't love how it worked. It was a fine class. It was great. People were stoked. They got a good workout. I got to see people I hadn't seen in a while. We had fun. All those things happen. Check, check, check. Yet there are still several different ways that I'm like, I didn't really like how that went down. That didn't really go according to plan. I probably should have done this differently. It's constant. And if you get to the point where it's creating a feedback loop with yourself, if you get to the point where you're just always giving yourself a little bit of feedback after every class, I don't need somebody to evaluate every class I do. I'm evaluating it for myself. But that has to start with like a pretty good self-awareness. And
Yeah.
many coaches think they have a good self-awareness, and then you watch yourself on video and all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, I had no idea I was doing that, or whatever the case may be. Now, you and I have had the
What
benefit of working in a job where we get evaluated and we get feedback outside of our bubble all of the time. But if you don't have that advantage, then you just have to, figure out the ways to do it and kind of burst that bubble that you're living in so that you can gain that awareness so that you can continue to give yourself the feedback. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say a lot of times you don't know what you don't know, right? And
Yes.
so you look at people's movement or whatever it may be and you're like, that looks pretty good. That looks like a pretty good squat to me, because you don't have the eye and know the difference between like subtle faults and not subtle faults and that kind of stuff. So um people are giving good call outs in the comments around the coach's eye, where you videotape a class and you or myself give feedback. We watch the video and we give feedback and we talk through opportunities there. We can point out some movement faults that maybe a specific coach you as a coach didn't see or didn't know was actually there until it gets called out. I know we've worked with Jess, we've worked with Amit a bunch doing coach's eyes. What do we
I'll
got
tell you
here?
what, I've done coaches' eyes with a bunch of coaches, several of which are in the comments here. And one of the coolest things is watching it live with them. They've already watched it and they're giving the feedback to themselves before I
Oh,
even have a chance to say it. And it's that just shows oftentimes you just need to watch it yourself and you will start to see like, oh, I already know I talked too much right there and I should have had them moving together right here. And like, you are a step ahead of me. And those are the exact things that I was going to say to you. And you've already seen it for yourself. Super cool.
well, and most of the time that's coming from people that they've done a coach's eye with us for the third, the fourth, the fifth time, right?
Right.
And so like two things. One, they're continuing to educate them. Like they're just so committed to this. They're ones that are already at the top of their game. They're super self-aware to where they can watch the video and they're aware of what's going on, but they're also the ones that are still signing up to get more feedback and more development. And I think like that kind of goes back to the thought process of deliberate practice. It's like this is a journey that never ends. You never coach the perfect class, you never become the best coach. It's like you've got to continue to evolve and get better and be committed to that, and it's really hard to do so because I, I can I'm sure there's others out there that agree with me that it's like coaching classes can get monotonous depending on, especially if you're a gym owner or a head coach and you're coaching 10, 12, 14 or more classes a week. It can get really hard not to just check the box and get through that. And so it takes a lot of determination to continue to want to get better in development and to develop. Um, let's see, we've got some other stuff going on here. Personal connection matters, not only fixing movement quality, but doing it in such a way that leaves the personal connection between the coach and the client. I think that's huge, huge merts. People are going to be way more open to your feedback if you make that connection. Um, what else? What's the best our team shows? Every mentor shows a personal connection.
Personal
We try to do that.
connection.
That's for sure. Yep.
Yeah, and that's something that y'all probably heard us say before is especially I'll get questions like this at the level 2 a lot. Like, what do you do with people who aren't receptive to cues or push back? And one of the first questions is always like, what's your relationship with them? Do you have rapport with them? Do they trust you? And that, if we want to be effective as coaches, it cannot be understated, those personal connections. Like, our people have to trust us. They have to know that their best interest is um, in our minds, and we're not just making changes to make changes. We're doing it to help them improve. And we build that platform all on those personal connections. That's going to help us. Not only that, but like, anytime you give your athlete a cue, that's essentially giving them feedback. Feedback is hard for anyone to get, whether they're getting it on their movement or whether we're getting feedback like we're talking about in classes. And if you get feedback from someone you don't really know or you don't really trust, it's going to land a lot differently than if you get feedback from someone you have a good, like a personal connection with and have that rapport with, for sure.
So I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are. Like, what if you got a coach that doesn't coach a lot? Let's call it 2 to 3 classes a week. The owner of the gym doesn't have a lot of time for class evaluations or feedback because your 2 or 3 classes are the 2 or 3 classes where they finally get to leave the gym and do what they need to with their family. They don't have a lot of extra income to sign up for some of these extra seminars or coach development courses. Like, what would you recommend that individual to do? What can they do to take development into their own hands and start the process?
Yeah, well, we have already talked about recording their classes, so that, of course, would be one right there. Um, Another thing that I'll oftentimes recommend people do is, if you have members that have been around for a long time and they're experienced and you trust them, or even if you have another coach taking your class, you can always just share one thing you're working with before the class, let them know what that is, and tell them, I'd love to have a little feedback on that at the end of class. The more specific you can make it, usually the better that goes. But an example might be, hey, I'm going to be trying a new progression today for whatever the movement is. I'd really like you to just pay attention and let me know if you felt like my teaching was clear, if it was really understandable, if you felt like we went through it like, smoothly, whatever. I'm just kind of making this up at this point right now, but just one example or one section of the class that you can tell them, here's what I'm going to be working on in class today. Can you just keep an eye on it? Because I'd love to know kind of how I do at the end of class. Have you ever tried that strategy?
Yeah, I asking people that you trust and that you know well that'll give you honest feedback. Hey, what do you think? I think that's huge. Um, I think there's, especially nowadays, I know even when I started coaching, there was enough content on YouTube and social media that if there was a movement that I didn't know how to teach, I would watch a video on how to teach it, and then I would try to take that and apply it. Now, I think one of the big takeaways from any of that stuff, we always push people to use like progressions from the level 1 and things like that, but evaluate how it goes, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and why you're doing each step. I think so many times, a lot of times we as coaches will just grab it and be like, well, this is how I was told to teach the movement. So this is just how I do it, without going the next step or taking like the next layer of, all right, I told them to do this. How did it turn out? Did it actually accomplish what I wanted to? Did it make my athletes move better? Like, what was I able to take away from this? And so I think it goes back to kind of self evaluating, not only you personally, but the stuff that I'm doing. Does it actually work? Does it accomplish what I want? I know most of like the complex gymnastics progressions and things like that that I've used that I consistently use now are combinations of probably like 4 or 5 different progressions that at one point I had stolen and tried to use. And I'm like, man, these 2 steps were awesome. These 2 steps did not seem to work, and I don't get them at all. So I'm going to throw those out. I'm going to keep those 2, and then let me find something else. So I think doing some of those type of things are big there as well.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of value to being thoughtful behind what you're planning on doing, of course, but just trying it and let the athlete's movement or let the response from the people you're coaching give you some feedback. And I'll tell that to people at level twos all the time. If they want to use like some random progression that they made up or they use at their gym or whatever, it's like, okay, cool. As long as there's reason behind it and you're thoughtful about it, let's try it and we'll see how it works. And if everyone's confused and no one's moving the way you want them to move, maybe it's not the best one, and then and you adjust it for next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about the online information is it's like it's a gift and a curse of how much more information there is now than there was years ago, because now anyone can get on there and be like, here's how you teach the push jerk, and you're like, cool, let's do this, and then it's like that didn't work at all. So you do have to be a little thoughtful on like which things you steal, which things you try. But sometimes it's just a matter of like, hey, we're moving with a PVC pipe, like we're just going to try it. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to do something different.
Do you,
Question.
yep,
And
from
yeah,
Jens, yep. Do you
I
vary
do.
your progression from session to session?
I do a little bit. I keep the basic progressions the same. Now there's some movements I don't like. If we have the medicine ball clean, for example, I use the level 1 medicine ball clean progression, but there's some that I'll change up a little bit. I'll combine a couple steps if it makes sense. It depends oftentimes on the experience level. In my group, here's an example. Yesterday, I coached, and all the athletes, I've coached them many times. They're all pretty experienced. And the movement was shoulder to overhead. And I had a plan of going through the push press progression. Then I was going to go through push jerk. And I just expedited that because they all know how to do those movements pretty well. And I've seen them do it. And we did a little bit of a progression, but I took out like the dip and hold. I just took out a few things so that I could give them a little more time to warm up. But I made that call on the spot. My plan was to use a pretty similar progression to the level 1 that I normally do, but I'll change them around. How about you?
Um, Similar, it sounds like to you. I typically use the level 1 progressions, but a lot of times I'll combine steps. So you mentioned the med ball clean progression. Well, if we're doing med ball cleans in a workout, the general warm up might have med ball deadlifts. It might have some med ball front squats. So more than
Spot.
likely, step 1 when I'm teaching, it's going to be like a deadlift shrug. I might go right to the shrug and pull under if we've already done some front squats. So I'll probably consolidate it. Same thing happens with like the push press or the sumo deadlift high pull, where I don't always do the deadlift or like the deadlift shrug slow or the dip drive slow. I jump right into the dip drive fast. But when it comes to other things, snatch, clean, even some handstand, muscle up or pull up progressions, like I'll vary it. I'll change it up a little bit based on who's in front of me, based on just giving some different exposure there. So I play around a little bit, but there's usually pretty consistent pieces and components, but I might mess around with it a little bit.
And what's
Um,
interesting too is like the points of performance never change, right? Like those are the same regardless. And so even if I adjust the progression a little bit, I'm not really changing what I'm focusing on. I'm just
yep.
changing kind of the way in which I tell people to hold a position. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, a good example is the snatch progression, whether you're doing like a top-down approach or you're doing what's currently in the level 1, which is a bottom-up approach. It's like you can play with that depending on the day, depending on the workout, depending on who's in front of you. But like you said, what you're going to be looking for is not going to change or probably shouldn't change.
Yeah, for sure. Um,
Um,
yeah, and Mertz makes a good point here. I'll pull this up. We do have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Totally. And that is another natural progression to development, in my opinion. The more we start to learn, the more we feel like it needs to be a little more complicated so that we can share all of the knowledge we have. And then it's almost like we loop back to the beginning where it's like, wait a second, we should just keep it really simple because that works the best. But sometimes you have to go through that process of making it harder before you realize it doesn't have to be that hard. I'll see that a bunch.
Like, I think the process of being on seminar staff and giving lectures, specifically, like, well, actually all the lectures, movement lectures, and even the breakout groups is such a good example of this. It's like you get hired on, you're doing whatever your role is, like you're running the groups, you stick to the progressions, you just coach because that's all you've really done. Then you start to learn some more stuff and understand the movements a little bit better. So you start adding more context and more context. And then you get to the point where you realize that these people are probably learning this stuff for the first time and they're not ready for more context. And
Mhm.
then to your point, they have to loop back around. And it seemed like that happened with every lecture as well. It's like, I'm just going to read the notes, essentially recite the notes. And then now I know more. So I'm going to add more. That usually blows up your timeline a little bit. And then it's like, wait a second, why am I adding all this fluff? Is it for them or is it for me? And
Yep.
usually it was for me and it didn't
Almost
need to be
always
done.
not for them. Yep.
And I think that Mertz, to your point here too, is the other big thing is like the basics get the most accomplished. I still, watch classes, coach classes, take classes, and I'm like, man, if if the coach here or I myself would have just spent an extra second to check the stance and grip and the setup position for all we're doing, these people would have went from being like moving like sevens and eights to moving like nines and tens. Like just that one little thing, and that is technically the most quote unquote basic thing you can work on with a movement is the setup position, right? Stance, grip, and body position. So um, not thinking that the knuckle position in the snatch is more important than like where the feet should be, where they actually grab the bar, and the rest of that. I think is an important thing to understand. Um, what else we got going on here? Yeah, and Ali makes a good point of like finding not only mentors to give you feedback, but people to watch and learn from. Like so much of what I've learned, I just watch somebody else do it and try
Mhm.
to replicate what I see. And so we've got a number of classes and examples in the knowledge of people on staff and L4s and seminar staff members coaching classes, and there's more to come with that. So love to hear that that's working because that's exactly how I learned.
Yeah, even taking other classes, like if you can take classes in your gym of other coaches, I know a lot of times we can get in the habit of just like hitting a workout by ourselves right before we coach a class or, getting it in an open gym or maybe you have a workout buddy that you do a workout with. But if you can take classes from other coaches, even coaches that you typically don't get the opportunity to see coach, uh, even if they're not running like a level 4 quality class, I guarantee you there's still one or two things that they're going to do, maybe a cue they use or maybe a way they teach something that you hear for the first time. It's like, "Oh, that's cool. I'm going to steal that." I mean, that is 100% the journey for me is it's like a sponge. Every time I'm watching someone, I'm like, "Oh, I like that. I'm going to take that." And it's not realistic to be like, I'm going to now teach my class exactly like that video I just watched. It's like, no, just pick one thing, pick two things that they do that you're like, oh, I'll try to implement that next time. And that can be a game changer just by getting out of what your bubble is that you're seeing every day and just letting yourself observe something different and then trying that thing that's different.
Yeah, and then to the kind of the same point we talked about earlier is like a lot of times coaches don't have the opportunity to go to other gyms to watch other people coach, and so we're trying to bring that to you with the knowledge and the Knowledge Pro by providing those resources. Hey, we've got a bunch of examples of classes being coached by really experienced coaches, level 4 seminar staff, level 3s, along with different variations of progressions that you can use, tips for seeing and correcting, and so taking advantage of that just helps speed up the process, right? It's like the process was much slower when we started just because there weren't as many resources. And so it's nice that ideally that can be expedited by having additional resources, getting in the coach's eye, getting feedback, and some of that kind of stuff. I like what Jess says here around progressions can stay the same, but delivery can change. What you emphasize and what you have people focus on. And this one
Say
is
less.
always important. This is what I have to remind myself constantly. Less is more. Just like James says here, make the communication easiest to receive, the basic, simple stuff, and say less. It's like we
People
get
want to
so
move. Yeah.
yes, and we get so passionate about this stuff, and we love it that we want to explain all the nuances. Unfortunately, most of our athletes don't care about nuance. They just want to move and work out and stay safe. Period.
Now, I'll get this pushback on that. So I'm going to push back to you, Todd, to see what you say. But I have some athletes that really do want to know. They do want to know the nuances. They want to know the why.
Sweet. And I go, cool. If I got somebody that comes up after class and goes, hey, you kept telling me to push my knees out when I squat. Why is that? I'm like, awesome. You want to come up to my office? Do you have 60 minutes? Let's talk about it. I can explain it to you one off afterwards, and I will get into as much and as many of the details as possible. But in class, we just ultimately we don't have time for it, because if I'm explaining so many details to you individually, then that's going to take away from everybody else. And also in this, because I get that same feedback. If I have to justify why I'm giving every cue, number one, every cue is now going to take nearly a minute. A lot of the whys are implied. If I'm telling you to push your knees out, it's probably because your knees are in. If I'm asking you to get back in your heels, it's probably because you're not in your heels, because you're on your toes or your heels are up. So a lot of the why is implied. I also feel like a lot of the people that ask those questions are coaches, and they want to know why because they geek out about this stuff more. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're referring to themselves, and it's like, you are unique. You're not like all the other athletes. Like, that's why you're a coach, is because you care a lot more about this stuff. And so don't run into the trap otherwise. Let's see. I didn't like them. What do we got going on here? What do we have? Learning more. 60 minutes feels impossible. I'm often 5 minutes late. Watching my videos. Don't like them. Still, I'm applying what I learned here. That's
That's
awesome.
awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
super
you got to
cool.
take it. I will tell you, I don't know that I ever like watch a class and I'm like, oh, I love this. This is great. I don't like any of my videos that I watch. It's always hard to stomach, right? Because there's opportunities for things to
Yeah.
improve. But taking that and taking stuff and implementing them. I also encourage people, when they do record a class, don't watch the whole thing. Like,
Oh,
60
okay.
minutes of watching your class is a lot. It's like, hey, watch it and go piece by piece. Watch the
Mm-hmm.
brief and then put it away for a day. Watch the general warm up, then don't do it again for a couple days.
Yeah, that's a cool
Go
idea.
through and don't do the whole thing, because that is really, really hard to stomach, especially as you get started with that.
Yeah, you could think about for as terms of your lesson plan, like every section of your lesson plan could just be like a different chapter of the class, right? And you just go back to do one chapter and then come back to it and watch it. And I feel the same. 60 minutes, even when I don't have a part A, a part B, a part C, just like a one part, it's still hard because there's so many things that we want to teach, and the transitions catch up to us, and chatting with everybody, and we just the more of a solid plan we can have, of course, the more we can give ourselves feedback of like why the 60 minutes. Like for my class yesterday, for example, I had less time in my cool down than I wanted, and I know it's just because I spent my general warm up lasted longer than it should have, and that just like puts you behind for the whole class, right? So, yeah, and Jens
In
makes a good
there.
point here. What'd you say? You've been there?
Yeah, been there.
Yeah. Yeah, we adjust the lesson plan, right? Look and see, and that's I'll see that so many times looking at people's plans, and I fell into the trap yesterday. It's like you don't need to spend 10 minutes on a general warm up, and when you have 3 movements that you're going to try to teach and you have like a 20-minute workout. So, just adjusting things from there. Coaching is hard.
Yeah, big shout out to Amit about the article that he wrote. And in fact, if you guys are part of the knowledge, uh, we posted a interview with him about the article, which was awesome. Um, let's see, another way to see what you're working on for the session and then watch that portion. For instance, if working on saying static cues for every rep, then just watch the specific warm up. Yeah, I think that's huge. Of like making a goal before your session, videotape the class, but then just watch specifically for that, at least at that time, I think is a great way to do it. I'd be curious to hear just from people in the audience here that I know a lot of you guys are a part of the knowledge and you're doing a lot. You're super committed to your development. So, is there anything additional that we've not touched on or that we've not talked about that you guys are doing to work on your development or your team's development? Or if you guys have any additional questions on that stuff, always want to hear and help you guys with any of those questions and then share best practices of what anybody else is doing here as well. Um, I know you've worked a lot with coaches that are trying to be better, doing not only coach development in the Knowledge Pro, but also workshops and seminars. Any additional takeaways? We've talked a lot about what's required to continue to develop and take ownership of your own development. But have you seen anything as far as like common trends or through lines from newer coaches that they can think about and things that maybe they're not aware of that they should probably be considering and working on to help them
Yes.
in their journey?
Yeah, and it probably won't surprise you to hear this, but the top thing that I see is that I want coaches to better know the points of performance of the movements. Just
It's
know them, like, know them. Not, "Oh, it's a squat. Okay, what are the points per performance? Alright, well, they need to have their
feet
feet."
under the
Yeah,
shoulders.
and
Yep.
it's just even listing, okay, cool, that's a good setup. And I'm not even concerned about even the semantics of like, well, setup position's not really a point of performance, like whatever. If you can list out everything you're looking for a movement, cool. And that includes, the setup and all of that. But just how long it takes people to kind of work through it and figure it out. And then they, getting maybe 3 things they want to see out of 6 things that really should happen. Or barbell movements are a huge thing because people always forget about the bar path, which is the main thing that's happening during the execution. And it seems, once again, it seems super straightforward and super basic. But if you don't know those really, really well, you're not going to set yourself up for success for anything else, because everything builds on the fact that people ask us that all the time, how do you make so many corrections so quickly? And it's because I know what the movement should look like so well. I don't have to use any brain space to be figuring out, okay, I'm looking for this, and what else do I need? I just know that. And when you can build all of your other coaching on that basic knowledge, it just makes it so much easier. So that's one of the main things that I see just across the board, is just a lack of that basic knowledge of what we're looking for in any movement, like all the checklist, if you will.
It's funny. It's like I've had a coaching internship since I started my gym, and it's kind of evolved and changed over the years. But step one in that has always been memorizing the 9 foundational movements, their points of performance, and teaching progressions. It's
Hmm.
like that's where it starts, regardless. And it's funny because whenever somebody comes and asks if like that they want to coach, ask me if they can coach, or if I ask them, I'm like, step one is to memorize this stuff, and it's on you. You can memorize it in 2 days, and I'll give you an informal quiz, and we'll see if you're ready. Or you can come to me when you've memorized it, and that is such a like it's just such an easy place to start because it tells me exactly what I need to know about their commitment to coaching.
Yeah, and people will discount it so much, like, "This is so boring. Why do I have to memorize this?" And there's this sense that memorization doesn't equate or equal to being good out on the coaching floor, and that's just not it's just not true. Spend the time to memorize things. It makes it seem like, geez, I remember working years ago. My husband got a job when he was bartending. He got a job at like this fancy, like nicer restaurant. They had all these like fancy cocktails. And one of the requirements for him to get behind the bar and start working is he had to memorize all the recipes of these cocktails. And I just remember working with him. This is so long ago. I remember working with him with these flashcards, and I'm quizzing him like, okay, I'd name the drink, and he'd have to like list the ingredients out. And it's like that work right there allowed him to get behind the bar. And when someone ordered that drink, it's like, boom, got it. He knew exactly what was in it. So he could just get the drink made and get it to them quickly. And it's the same. It starts with that behind the scenes work that doesn't sound that exciting. It's the flashcards. It's like, okay, this movement. All right, it's this. Cool. And then you get out on the floor, and when someone's doing that movement, you don't even have to think about it because you
Right.
know them like the back of your hand.
Well, and that's exactly it, is like if you're using your mental resources to remember, to try to recall what the points of performance are, you can't actually be in the moment and see the points of performance, whether they're happening or not.
100%. Yeah.
So it's like you've got
I
to
will
have
die on
that
this
stuff
hill.
so down. Yeah, I know. It's like it's the easiest. It's like memorize the points of performance is step one, and then teach and check for stance, grip, and body position, the setups.
And that's
It's
your
like
hill, I know.
if you can do those two things, you're 90% of the way there.
So I wanted to
Um,
pull this up from
yep.
Adam, right? Because when we talk about points of performance, so often we're talking about like our 9 foundational movements. So I'm curious to hear from you, Todd, when you see that like points of performance for gymnastics, running, rowing, progressions for, well, let's table progressions, but just the points of performance. What is the first thing that really comes to mind when we're talking about points of performance for movements outside of the 9 and maybe some more obscure like the running or the rowing?
I look at rowing and I'm like, well, rowing is just you're just doing a sumo deadlift high pull in a different plane, right? And so that one, I'm looking for the exact same stuff that I'm looking for there, which is a neutral spine position and then timing, right? We want the core to
Quarter
extremity
extremity.
movement pattern. Gymnastics, although our feet aren't on the ground and we're now hanging, like body positions are going to look very, very similar. Timing and core to extremity is still
Mhm.
going to be critical with that there. So I see most of those as kind of the same thing. Now, running's a little bit unique, but understanding like some just even basic level of biomechanics and like the concepts of like the pose running method gives me some things to look for and consider there. It's like so much of coaching and obsessing over movements and positions has made me just look at the way that people move in general, like what their feet do when when people walk, what their knees do, what their hips do, what their back, what like everything does. And so much of that applies to running that I can look at and think of that. I read the comment more so as like more progressions and more concepts on how do we teach these things, and how can we highlight what we're looking for each step along the way. I think is
Like,
I think a big thing for coaches just in general. I think there's less of that than there are barbell
right,
teaching
right. And even
progressions, right?
having that provided list, right? Where it's like, here's the points of performance you are looking for the pull up here or for a handstand push up. Here's the points of performance you're looking for running. Um, yeah. And I think that I don't think that's a bad call at all. But we can
Yeah.
create them and we know that they're there. Because I've heard the argument sometimes like those movements don't have them, and they absolutely have them. It's just not delivered on like this like nice platter as cleanly as the 9 foundational movements.
Adam, more to come for you, my friend. You will see more of those progressions and points of performance in the knowledge. Count on it. What else do we have? Yep. Allie, we would love to be there and work with your coaches. That would be awesome. Please make that happen. Let's do it. Um, 5 a.m. squat club, you're absolutely right. It's an easy way to weed people out. If they don't ever memorize, then like I said, they're not committed to coaching. And so it's easy to not have to go through the process there. Um, all right. Renee, I would love to hear how you agree to disagree. I'm sure there are some nuance differences, and I completely agree with that. But the big picture concepts of what's happening with a sumo deadlift high pull, specifically in the core to extremity and the timing, um, I would love to know what's different there.
Oftentimes with things like this, I think about it like, yes, they're two different movements, but if we are trying to
Thinking,
develop, y- go ahead.
I was gonna say thinking big picture. Yeah,
Hmm.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we're trying to develop our coaching eye, if we're trying to develop newer coaches, it's so helpful to find these commonalities with big themes that go translate between movements, right? So again, we're looking at core to extremity, we're looking at back position, we're looking at I know I'm not going to open up the floodgate for this, but I know there's some debate on can the heel come up or can it not? And that's a little bit of a nuance, but we're certainly not trying to drive through the toes, I don't think, every single time. So it's just like, all right, bar path could be one. I know that we don't want that chain going up and down like this. And so therefore I need to make sure that the quarter extremity is happening in order to keep the chain straight so it's not looping around the knees each time. So there's while they are two different movements, if we look at the main points of performance of something like a deadlift or a sumo deadlift high pull, there's transference over to how we can teach proper positioning on a rower. And then of course there's many different nuances with rowing that go far beyond that. That's the way that I look at it when you compared the two. Am I off base there?
No, I agree with you, and that's always we're looking for big picture, and we're looking for consistency because I'm sure the same thing could be said where I'm like, hey, consistency between a deadlift, a sumo deadlift high pull, and a clean, or consistency between a deadlift and a clean deadlift, and I'm sure an Olympic lifting specialist would be like, they're not even close. Agree to disagree, and I'm like, I get it in the trenches of like specifics, yeah, on a world class level, you're right. There's probably a lot of difference, but big picture, generalist wise, I don't think so. Core to extremity, but the nuances, finish position, shoulder direction. Yeah, I like, of course, because I'm pulling here as opposed to pulling here, like that to me, that no offense to anything, but that seems obvious, right? We're pulling in different directions. So the finish position and the shoulder position is not going to be the same because one's pulling vertically, one's pulling horizontally. But once again, we want to think we're working with generalists and we're thinking big picture and trying to find consistency across movement patterns and consistency across our athletes and seeing and correcting. Um, and so, to your point right here, the timing, core to extremity, yes, nuances, the nuances of anything. And if you're looking at a specialist in any of this stuff, I can guarantee you, like if we talk to a gymnast and they want to talk about the nuances of a kipping pull up or any of our muscle ups or our handstand variants, they would be like, what we do is completely ridiculous and completely different. And I would agree with them, but there are at least there's some framework and some basics there. What do
You
you
know what
think
this
about?
makes me think of really quick is, one of the things we do talk about in the level 1 of the benefits of the 9 foundational movements and why there are 9 foundational movements is just that they give us that they're like building blocks and we can mix and match them. So one of the examples we give is if we can teach a sumo deadlift high pull and we can teach an overhead squat, we're a couple cues away from being able to teach a snatch. If we can teach a sumo deadlift high pull, then we're that much closer to being able to teach a kettlebell swing. And obviously these movements are not the same and there's differences in those movements. It's not like you're going to get from here to here like super clean, but big picture is there's enough similarities that it gives us a starting point that
Yeah,
we can work from and build on, so we're not just going into it completely blind. So if we know the points of performance for the 9 foundational movements, we can look at other movements and figure out like, oh, that looks pretty similar. I bet there's some crossover that I can at least take some of these big rocks in the jar and be like, okay, I still need to see quarter extremity here. And then once we have those big rocks, then we can start to like play around with the nuances and make sure the person's doing that specific movement the way that it's meant to be done.
yeah, love that. Yeah, and I think that's where Renee's going with this. All right. I'm trying to avoid these shadows here, that sunlight. But what's your thoughts with what Adam says here? Harder to hold static positions in the running, the rowing, and the gymnastics. And I
Yes.
agree, but how do we yes, yes. agree.
Hold
How do
my
how do
holding my
we
run.
how do we um how do we overcome some of that? Like,
I mean,
what's your
I just
thought?
depending on the movement, I just try to create the static positions where I can, right? And uh, knowing that we're not gonna be able to hold them the same as we would for some of these. There's just not gonna be as much opportunity, and so when I can create an opportunity, I do. An example, if we're on the pull-up bar, it's like, instead of just telling everyone, "All right, jump up and give me 3 kip swings," or whatever, maybe we just do a jump and hold for the first step. So that static position becomes, what's their body position? Are their feet together? Are they in that hollow hold? Are we having a little active shoulder? Is their hand placement where I want it to be? All right, everyone pop down. And then that, at least I have that static position where I can get everyone's setup correct, and the body position correct before we start going into the movement.
Yep.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I do the same thing. Gymnastics, like, look for opportunities, usually in the start to find a static position. Um, Rowing, you can have people hold in that catch position. You can have people hold in the finish or the drive. In running, you can have people hold in that pose position, that figure four position, and like look for and create static positions there. And it doesn't have to be for a long time, and it doesn't have to be a ton, but just looking for opportunities to get people to hold positions, even when the movements themselves are dynamic. Like handstands, you can get people to kick up, hold that handstand position to make sure their hands are where they need to be, make sure their body looks like what it needs to be. Have them do negatives so you can see like the line of action. So all of that stuff can be there as well. So yes, I completely agree. It's tougher because there's less, um, but uh, there are some opportunities to create some stuff there.
I don't know if Allie's still on the call, but we were on a call last week and she mentioned, she was joking, of course, but like holding the top position, the finished position of a toes to bar. It's like having everyone hold at it's the concept of static dynamic is the concept to help us, but it's not going to directly relate to every single movement, right? Like we're not going to do every single movement static, dynamic, static. So we fit it in where we can and know that some movements just do not lend themselves to a lot of static hold positions. But the concept's still the same. If we can find a place to hold them, cool. We can fix their setup a little bit. Maybe on some we can hold the finished position, the top of a handstand or something. But for the most part, we just know the points of performance. We know what it is we're looking for, and then that's going to help us see the things that are happening dynamically in the movements. We don't have a lot of opportunity in the static. Yeah, like this comment by Jens. They're different. That's why they're different, because they're different, but they all have something in common. They're functional movements.
Yep, love it. That's that universal motor recruitment pattern, right? There's some carryover from one movement to the next. There's some common movement themes contained within those movements, more often than not. So, yep, love it. Well, cool, Cabo. Always a pleasure here. That was fun listening to your thoughts on taking ownership on your own self development. I think we've got some cool things in the works, to continue to help level up coaches. Not only is there some cool things that are coming with Affiliate Con, if you guys have not signed up yet, whether you're an affiliate owner, whether you're a coach, or just somebody that does CrossFit, this is the event for you. So make sure that you guys sign up for that. It is going to be awesome. The lineup of speakers and coaches and people that are going to be there are going to be awesome. And a little teaser, there's a decent chance that you guys are going to see some of those people on this Thursday morning call, going forward over the next few weeks. So more to come as far as we're going to have some fun special guests on this. And also be on the lookout for some new knowledge YouTube and IG accounts potentially. There might be some cool stuff coming that direction as well. So I have a feeling it might be coming pretty soon. So, and just like Adam did with more progressions on gymnastics, rowing, and running, give us some requests on some stuff that you guys need and want in your development. And we're going to do our best to keep providing you guys the best in-class tools and resources to become the best coaches that you possibly can. So as always, thank you guys for your time. Cabo, it was a pleasure. Appreciate the interaction, the engagement, and the questions. Let us know if you guys need anything, and we hope to see you next Thursday and in person at Affiliate Con. Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. Now, if you're a coach who wants to coach more effectively, impact your members, and advance your career, then the Knowledge Pro is the next step. Inside, you'll get hundreds of coaching videos, weekly calls with level 4 coaches, and direct feedback on your coaching. From homework reviews to full class breakdowns, we do it all. This is the best way to grow as a coach and take your skills to the next level. Now, you can join the Knowledge Pro at besthouroftheirday.com/the-knowledge. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Now keep coaching, keep improving, and we'll see you next time.